All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another season of 3 Up, 3 Down. Topic of conversation here for us in this new season here for the month of June is Little League's new four-umpire system, specifically for the 60-foot diamond. So we're excited to go ahead and roll that one out. A couple things obviously happened for Little League here this week as we start to get closer and closer to tournament play. Some of us have started, Tournament of Champions and that kind of stuff, and even the district tournament is beginning to near upon us. The international tournament is. And with that, there are a couple resources that we want to make sure that we provide you guys with. And DJ, you can link these in the chat, and I'll try and remember to put them in the description for us when I link this on YouTube. The first of which is one of Gary's documents from the great folks out west, the tournament rules of interest, to kind of give you an idea here of some of the differences or things to at least be considering as we take a look at the differences between regular season and tournament season, what might be different and things like that. And the other one came out here earlier this week. That is the MPR clarification, the mandatory play rule clarification that came from Little League. Still continuing to evolve. I know that the district administrators were all in a meeting last night here to kind of get an extra mandatory play clarification. At least they were here in the central and I think the eastern regions. I'm not sure if other regions have had theirs, but I do know that there'll be some more clarification, at least passed down through the district administrator, who will then relay that hopefully to district officials and league officials as well. So continue to bug, I guess you could say, your district administrators out there with regards to the mandatory play clarification and questions you may have on that one, because they are kind of more in the know than a lot of other folks here, thanks to the recent webinars that they would have had as well. But nonetheless, those two documents are in the chat for you. Again, that's the tournament rules of interest from the great folks out west, so that we all know the tournament rules, and then secondly, the mandatory play clarification here coming up as well. Okay, so those are the two things out there here for us to go ahead and share as we all get ready for tournament season. Now, the other thing that's also important for us to go ahead and take a look at in terms of tournament season is multi-member crew mechanics. And the four-umpire system, as I mentioned, is our topic of conversation here for us today. Now, before I go ahead and get into kind of the specifics and some of those things about the four-umpire system, our big picture goal here today is to just kind of get an understanding of the two basic rotations and what's required of each umpire in those rotations. So it's kind of like an aerial view where a lot of the things we'll start to hint at are a little bit more specific that we'll cover later in the month. So today is kind of like the philosophy here in presenting and introducing everyone and rolling out this four-umpire system is to kind of go whole, part, whole, so to speak, to it. So today's the whole. What are the rotations? When do we use them? What do they look like? What's it requiring of each umpire? And then in kind of the middle parts of the month, we'll take a look at some of the more specifics, such as positioning and different types of adjustments we can make to positioning. And then lastly, we'll put it all together here. So whole, part, whole is kind of the philosophy. And again, today, big picture view, really just want to get the basics as to when do I use these rotations and where do I have to be? And those are kind of the major questions that we want to go ahead and take a look at. So that is what is on the agenda here for us today. DJ, Seth, anybody else, anything here before we go ahead and get rolling and into the good stuff here, so to speak, today? Anything else at all before we get going?
Nope, I'm all good.
Let's roll.
All right, so let me go ahead and get everything closed off here for me. It shows everything here. So let me go ahead and get ready to go here again. Typical here for us just to go ahead and, as I say, take a big picture view. And again, that's basic rotations. I'm going to mention a little bit of responsibilities. We'll get into more specific responsibilities, more so in our next meeting next week. But nonetheless, here, as you see here, basic rotations, general philosophy is what we're trying to take a look at here with Little League's new four-umpire system. Now, let's first take a look at the general philosophy. And essentially, what Little League has done, and it has taken a lot of the different four-umpire systems that were used by a variety of different regions prior to this point, kind of tried to mesh them and take the best of what was all there together and really boil it down to kind of one of three scenarios. Either one, we don't rotate. Second, we will rotate in a clockwise fashion, and I'll talk about that here in just a second. Or we just use one umpire to kind of fill when another umpire leaves. So that's kind of the big picture view of what exactly is going on. And in that whole idea, there are a couple of founding philosophies of the system. Number one, try and front load as many umpires ahead of runners as possible. So that means we want to try and keep umpires ahead and positioned ahead as much as possible. Secondly, we're going to assign responsibilities and rotations based upon what's going to be most likely to happen. So highest probabilities in order of priority. Thirdly, then, when we assign an umpire to multiple base coverage, so if you're assigned in a rotation, for example, second and third base, be careful not to overcompensate. We'll talk about that in one of the two rotations here in just a second. But nonetheless, here, when you have multiple base coverage, make sure not to overcompensate. So those are three of the grounding philosophies here for us, and we'll revisit those as we kind of present some of these themes as well. Fourthly, prioritize freedom of movement. When we start to talk about initial starting position later on in the month, we'll talk about this one here too. We'll kind of mention a little bit today as we take a look then at some of our positioning in rotation. And then lastly, umpire communication, something that we'll definitely hit on both verbally and non-verbally. For example, today we'll talk about the usage of a stop hand. I'll try and highlight that one today, and we'll definitely circle back to it again. But again, today is that big picture view. We don't want to get too specific. Just understand the basic rotations, where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there, and kind of move on from there. But big picture wise here, these are the general philosophical foundations of the 4-umpire system. Now, before we take a look at the rotations that are used, and there are two different types of rotations, and I'll talk about those here momentarily, just want to make sure that we understand areas of responsibility, because as we know in the 4-umpire system, we are going to allow U1, U2, or U3 to go ahead and go out on a trouble ball. We'll talk about that here in areas of responsibility. Now, if I take a look here real quick at catch, no catch responsibilities, the plate umpire here is going to be responsible for all catch, no catch on the infield, as well as all catch, no catch that is routine on the in the outfield. Okay, so all catch, no catch in the infield belongs to the plate umpire, and then all catch, no catch that is routine, all routine batted balls then to the outfield belong to the plate umpire. Now, as we see here, there is an exception. This is the trouble ball, and we'll kind of define the trouble ball as we would have prior to this point. Remember, trouble ball basically is something that is going to require extraordinary effort by a fielder, so charging in hard, something below the waist if they're going backwards. So extraordinary effort by a fielder. Converging fielders, so one or more fielders trying to go ahead and field the same batted ball, something that threatens the boundary, either obviously the outfield fence or potentially even the fence down the lines, depending on how close they may be to the foul lines. And then lastly here, anything that's within about 20 feet of the line would be a trouble ball, and that's what we're going to allow then any base umpire to go out on. So to go ahead and make sure that we're in clear shape here with catch, no catch responsibilities. On the infield, everything belongs to the plate umpire. If it is routine, whether it's on the infield or in the outfield, if it's routine, it belongs to the plate umpire, those fly balls. And then trouble balls, as we mentioned, converging fielders, extraordinary effort, threatens the boundary, or lastly, within 20 feet of the fair or foul line, those would then all belong to the base umpires. I think we got a little bit of a diagram here to go ahead and put that into perspective here, and it goes ahead and just kind of paints a picture as to what exactly I just said. Remember, U1 is going to take them and be responsible here in terms of all these trouble balls, and that trouble ball then would be anything for U1 that would take the right fielder, in this case F9, towards the line. Okay, so U1 has anything that requires the right fielder, F9, to move towards the right field foul line. Anything from the right fielder straight in and straight back, including the center fielder straight in and straight back, and then the left fielder, F7, straight in and straight back. All that then belongs to U2. Now, many people have probably referred to this as the V, so that is definitely can be true. And then just as we talked about with U1 having the right fielder towards the line, that means then that U3 has the left fielder and anything that would take him or her directly to the line. So U3 has F7, the left fielder, going any direction to the left field foul line. I think this gives a pretty good view. Now remember, we're only seeing the base umpires, U1, U2, and U3, go out on fly balls that are labeled as trouble balls. So that's going to require us to pause, read, and react to those trouble balls. Remember, trouble balls fall into one of four categories or criteria. One, something that is going to require extraordinary effort. Converging fielders would be the second one. Third one, anything that threatens the boundary. And lastly, anything on the line, the foul line or fair line, 20 feet in there. So that kind of gives us an understanding then of these areas of responsibility that would then allow U1, U2, or U3 to go out on fly balls when they are in their area of responsibility. Now, before moving on, one thing to make sure that we understand here when trying to figure out who is supposed to go out on a fly ball, on a trouble ball, we want to make sure that we read the fielder rather than the ball. Because remember, all of this stuff, as you see here on the screen, is labeled by the action of the fielder. So when we talk about pause, read, and react, yes, we want to read the baseball, but we don't want to necessarily, or the softball, but we don't want to necessarily look up at the ball. We would rather, number one, obviously we have to know where the ball is in kind of in a general vicinity. But in order to determine and figure out which umpire is responsible to be out on a trouble ball, we must read the fielder, not necessarily the ball, because again, our areas of responsibility are labeled and determined by the movements of the fielder. And again, that's a concept here that I just want to highlight here, and that we'll definitely talk a little bit more about when we talk about tracking and chasing in our third segment here later in the season. Now, today here, as I mentioned, is main focus is on basic rotations, and we have to at least number one know our areas of responsibility as we head into basic rotation. So, just general guidelines, area responsibilities. There, we're going to come back and circle back to that next week and the week after. But today's main focus here then is on the basic rotations. Now, for us on the 60-foot diamond, there are basically just two rotations that we are going to see used in the 4-umpire system. Now, Little League's manual that has been released has not issued any types of names to these individual rotations. I'm going to offer some names just to go ahead and give us some vocabulary to use, and that way when questions come up or we start to talk about them, we can at least say, hey, this rotation, rather than just trying to describe the entire rotation. So the first rotation that we're going to talk about today is what's known as the full rotation, or what I'm labeling as the full rotation. Again, important to note, this isn't a Little League interpretation or label. It's something that I'm giving us to use just so that we have common vernacular to use. So this full rotation is going to be used with no runners in scoring position anytime U2 or U3 leaves to cover catch, no catch. And we'll kind of go through that scenario here in just a second. Again, I call this the full rotation simply because everyone moves. This is the general clockwise rotation that we're probably all most familiar with. When, let's say, U2 leaves, U3 covers second base, plate umpire moves up to third base, and then the first base umpire comes home. Where everybody moves, that's why I'm offering this as the full rotation, just so that we have a common vernacular and a common term to use to at least describe then that type of rotation. So that is the first type of rotation. Again, no runners in scoring position when U2 or U3 leaves. With runners in scoring position, or anytime U1 leaves, we use the fill rotation. And I call it the fill rotation simply because we are only going to use one umpire to fill the vacancy that was created by the umpire that left on the trouble ball. So you've got the full rotation and then the fill rotation. Again, a disclaimer, these are not things that Little League put in their manual, but they are two terms here that I am offering us to go ahead and use as common vernacular when we have questions and things like that. That way we know exactly what each other are talking about. Now, again, these are the two types of rotations that are going to be used in the 4-umpire system, the full rotation and the fill rotation. Again, full rotation, no runners in scoring position anytime U2 or U3 leaves. The fill rotation then is used with runners in scoring position, and we're only using one umpire to fill the vacancy that's created by the other umpire. Okay, so hopefully then we can kind of see why exactly we're going to use these two types of terms here at this particular time. Now I'm going to start with the full rotation. We'll break that one down. I've got some video clips. We'll do the same then here with the fill rotation as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'm going to go ahead and annotate this a little bit as well. Before I even start to annotate anything as I get going here, DJ, Seth, anything in the chat or anything like that to take a look at here or talk about?
Your chat's clear. You're good to keep going.
Okay. Alrighty, so full rotation, as I mentioned, when is it used? And that's one of the big things that we want to make sure that we understand here today. It's used anytime there are no runners in scoring position. That's what that label abbreviation means, NRISP, no runners in scoring position. Anytime U2 or U3 leaves to cover catch, no catch. So that's the when. So let's take a look then at how. So some of these basic movements. Now remember, this full rotation is probably the rotation that we are all most familiar with. We have that clockwise rotation. So let me go ahead and start to draw on this one here and start to annotate it. So let's go ahead and say that U2 decides to go ahead and leave. So if U2 decides to leave, remember we get a clockwise rotation. So this means then here that U3 will have to pivot inside into the working area. We'll use the plate umpire to move up the line in foul territory towards third base. He'll be responsible or she'll be responsible for third base. And then U1 will observe the batter runner's touch or anything at first base and then release to point of plate down in foul territory all the way home. Okay, so that's kind of the basic movements here for us to go ahead and take a look at. Now, as I go ahead and populate the remaining parts here of the basic movements here, a couple things to at least address. First of all, with U3. If we take a look at U3's route, typically here what we've seen a lot of umpires do in the past is they have tried to take a little bit of a position that may be too deep. Now, when we only have one responsibility in this type of rotation, we can get a little bit closer to the base. Which is something to go ahead and at least go ahead and be aware of. So as we start to think about these rotations, where we only have a singular responsibility, in this case U3 is only responsible for plays at second base, we can be a little bit closer. So I wouldn't necessarily be any closer than potentially toes on the grass line here or on the cutout. But for us to be super far deep back in here, that obviously puts us further away from the base. And again, because our responsibilities here in this case are singular, we can go ahead and get closer. And rather than be toes this deep as I have diagrammed, we want to kind of move that one up a little bit right here to our toes, kind of on the grass line here. Same is true here with the plate umpire. Very similar to the ways in which we cover third base in the 2-umpire system. Our route is going to be to third base. Remember, our goal here, both as U3 and the plate umpire, is to arrive before the runner. We must arrive before the runner. So we've got to break and read on our partners there. Remember, the plate umpire will go in foul territory. And remember, we're kind of trying to eliminate the library rather than, get to the library and stop. Let's use the whole distance as the library where we're chest to ball and we are watching and reading the play there. We can afford for adjusted positioning here. Typically here, because our responsibilities are singular, we can take plays on the back side of the base here at point of base. Some people may still go ahead and go into the cutout. I'll kind of show you some ideas about whether or not that's a good idea or whether or not that's appropriate in certain situations as well, all kind of dictated by the plays and in your own personal philosophy. Lastly, U1's route to the plate is in foul territory, going straight to point of plate. Remember, we want to kind of stay away from the back edge of the dirt circle. Rather, we want to use point of plate, which basically takes us then 5 to 7 feet off the fielder receiving the throw, so we can go ahead and get in the best position possible then for potential plays at the plate. So again, that's the basic movement here that we see come about from the situation of the full rotation. And again, U2 or U3 is going to move to cover second base. Plate umpire is going to go ahead and cover third base. U1 observes the touchdown and goes ahead and releases to home. Now, a couple quick disclaimers to make sure that we have here too. Let's say for whatever reason we get a ball that both U2 and U3 break out on. If two umpires are going to break on the same fly ball, we're going to allow U2 to be the quarterback. So U2 will be able to continue his or her pursuit, and that'll make U3 then break off that pursuit and then pivot into the working area and rotate accordingly. So if two umpires break on the same fly ball, we're going to defer to U2. And what that means is we continue to allow U2 to chase it, and then rather the wing umpire, in this case in my example, U3 would pivot in or go ahead and rotate accordingly. Now, whether or not U2 is correct, we're always going to defer to our quarterback. So even though U2 may chase a fly ball that may not be his or hers to actually go ahead and chase, again, when two umpires break on the same fly ball, we give U2 the benefit of the doubt, we defer to U2, and that means then the wing umpires, U1 or U3, will go ahead then and break on in. And again, remember, anytime that we are in rotation here, specifically in the full rotation, we want to rotate aggressively with the intent to arrive before the runner. And that's kind of an important concept to go ahead and make sure that we understand here moving forward. Let me see here. Let me get rid of my annotations here before I didn't realize that they would go on out. Okay, so I've got a couple different videos here and diagrams for us to take a look at just from what exactly the full rotation looks like. The first one is actually a 90-foot diamond. It comes from the Division III Regional out in Decatur, Illinois. But nonetheless, it gives us a really good idea of those different types of positionings and the expectations and general movements of the fielder. So we'll go ahead and get this one rolling out here. Again, this is the full rotation. The play here that we're going to see, the pitch is actually on its way. It's going to be a home run to left center. U2 is going to give chase, and then we'll get to take a look then at the rotation of the umpires. So again, we're going to have a trouble ball here because this is a home run ball that threatens the boundary, threatens the fence. As you can see here, U2 gives track and chase to it, so he is out on this fly ball. And you can see our movement by the umpires. We are seeing them rotate aggressively with the intent of arriving before the runner. And as I mentioned here in our route, take a look at U3's route to second base. He's going to get all the way there, put his toes essentially on the grass line because his responsibilities are singular here. That allows him then to adjust with the play. Plate umpire, as you see, has moved up to the third base in foul territory. Both U2 and the plate umpire have arrived at their base of responsibility before the runner, which is good. That's exactly what we want to see happen. And then you can see the first base umpire observe the batter runner's touch and then comes down the foul line in fair territory. Comes down the line in foul territory, and then goes directly to point of plate. Okay, so each of these umpires in this home run, very clear example of the basic movements here in the full rotation. Now, what I want to do here is kind of break down each umpire's route and what exactly they look like in rotation. So I want to focus here on U3 in rotation. So in this case, U2 on this example is going to go cover a foul ball. I'm sorry, a fly ball to the outfield. U3 then will pivot in and be responsible for second base. So let's take a look here at the route U3 then has to second base. So again, fly ball. This one, in the mind of U2, threatens the boundary or it required extraordinary effort, so he's out on it. And then let's take a look then at U3. You can see U3 starting to pivot in to the working area. And again, kind of want to use that toes on the grass line as our line of demarcation here in the full rotation for U3, because that allows us to go ahead and adjust accordingly with this play. If it may have pushed to right field, maybe we swing back to the backside. Here with the ball in left field or left center, we probably get pinched to the inside here as well. And again, that gives us a great position for a potential play at second base. So again, U3's route here is basically a direct line from his initial starting position right here to about the cutout of second base. And that way here, because his responsibility is singular, he's in a good spot then to go ahead and take this play. And again, that's U3's route with U2 out. Let's take a look at the same concept, this time with the plate umpire. Okay, so U2 is going to give track and chase to this ball into right center. It's actually going to be a triple. So the plate umpire is responsible for the batter runner at third base. So let's focus in on the route of the plate umpire. Again, a ball to right center, probably not one that actually needed a track or chase on. Nonetheless, we're out on it. So I don't think we needed to go ahead and chase this one. But nonetheless, U2 is out. So we're going to go ahead and rotate. You can see here the glimpse of U3. He has pivoted in. And then let's take a look then at the plate umpire. Remember, the plate umpire should move up the line in foul territory. And here we see the plate umpire position basically for the wedge at third base. Okay. Now, there are some teachings out there that are a little bit older and a little bit older philosophies that may still employ what we used in the two umpire system. And that's when we come up the foul line and then we come into the cutout. If you want to use that, that's okay. I'll give you a clip here in just a second that may change your mind on that one here too. This is kind of one of the more newer philosophies to take the play at point of bag and use the wedge. And this is exactly what our umpire has done. What we generally try and teach, again, is 5 to 7 feet off the fielder for the wedge, which basically puts us somewhere between the base and the coach's box. So I think this umpire is probably just a step too deep. We generally say that usually this grass line is about 3 or 4 feet off the base. So we kind of want to be like toes on the grass line a little bit more so, not as deep as this umpire is. But nonetheless here, the plate umpire's route has been up in foul territory to cover third base. He's behind the fielder, and then is able to find the wedge. And we'll see a replay here of his look into the base here. And he does a great job of getting on the base side hip of the fielder. And then in this route is able to take that one. He's got his head and eyes in between the runner and the fielder here. And again, it's kind of completely up to you to adjust your position. If you're more comfortable with that concept of taking the play in fair territory as you would in a two umpire system, that's fine. Or if you want to use the wedge here in this case, this umpire here has given us a good example of how exactly to use that. Last umpire to go ahead and take a look at in this full rotation is U1. Remember, U1 is going to observe the batter runner's touch at first base, then release to the plate. He's going to communicate, I'm going home. And in that way, he is going to go ahead and come down into foul territory. The first base umpire, he or she will come down in through foul territory and then take point of plate at the plate. This play here kind of gives us an understanding as to why sometimes it may not be appropriate for us to cut onto the inside of the cutout. Because if you think about it, if the plate umpire went inside to the cutout here, he's kind of right in the way of this action here. So that's one thing to at least kind of consider in your positioning as plate umpire when you go up to cover third base. But nonetheless here, our job in this clip is to take a look at the job of U1. Remember, U1 observes the touch at first base, then comes down in foul territory to point of plate, and then he's in great position, in this case our umpire is, to wedge up the play at the plate. Okay? We've got a good look here. U2 moves to the cutout. The plate umpire moves up to third base and kind of just uses the evolution of the play to position effectively. And then the first base umpire comes down, takes point of plate there, and then has anything at the plate. DJ Seth, anything to add here in the full rotation here before we go ahead and move on at all?
Negative. All good.
Yep.
All right. One thing I do want to do in this clip here is highlight the work of U2. In this case, remember here that chest to ball is a huge fundamental that we'll often talk about here. So as we go ahead and see these umpires work and pivot in and things like that, Remember, we want to stay as much as possible chest to ball, especially as the ball clears us. In this case, excuse me, it was U3 who would have covered second base. Stay chest to ball, and remember, they would be responsible for any ensuing action back on the batter runner for plays there as well. We'll talk about that play after the play concept a little bit later, but just want to make sure that we understand the basic movements and obviously the fundamentals of chest to ball and proper use of eyes. They definitely carry over here as we continue to talk a little bit about the four-umpire system. All right, so that is one rotation, the full rotation. The fill rotation is the second rotation for us to go ahead and mention and talk about. Remember, the fill rotation then is going to be used anytime there are runners in scoring position or anytime U1 leaves. So let's go ahead and take a look at this one. Okay, it's going to be used anytime U2 or U3 are going to leave to cover a trouble ball, and we're going to use whichever one does not leave to basically pick up the vacancy created by the umpire who left. So if we take a look at the fill rotation, basic movements here, and I'll diagram them in just a second. Anytime U1 leaves, okay, anytime U1 leaves here, let me go ahead and get my diagram ready to go. Anytime U1 leaves, we are just then going to use U2 to come in and pick up. Now, the difference here in the fill and full rotation, obviously, is we only have one umpire moving. But as U2 comes into the working area, as I went ahead and diagrammed, his positioning is going to be a little bit deeper. And what I mean by that is we're going to put him a little bit closer to the mound. Why is he a little bit deeper here in the fill rotation than he was in the full rotation? Well, the answer is very simple. U2 is responsible then for everything at first base and everything at second base. So because U2's responsibilities are multiple, because he's got first base and second base, we've got to back that umpire into the working area a little bit deeper and then allow U2 then to close in on the play. And as we mentioned here, make sure that we don't overcompensate towards one base or the other. So U2 then here is going to pivot into the working area with U1 out, get a little bit deeper, go chest the ball, and let the ball take him or her to the play. Very similarly, let's say that U3 decides to go ahead and leave. This rotation, once again, would have U2 come back in and pivot into the working area. Now, as you see on the diagram, the other thing that I've also got here is U2 positioned in either B or C. When we talk about initial starting positions, U2 is going to have the ability to decide whether or not they want to be in B or C, depending on each situation. So you'll have some liberty to choose between B or C, and I'll offer some food for thought in making that decision later on in the season here, later on in the month as we go through our presentations. But nonetheless here, the fill rotation, very simply then, just goes ahead then and picks up whichever umpire leaves, whichever umpire fills that creates the vacancy. We're just going to pick them up with either U2 or U3, whichever one doesn't leave. Okay, so again, basic movements. Anytime U1 leaves, U2 will pivot in. Remember, we'll drift a little bit deeper into the working area. That way we can go ahead and make sure that we are in good shape with responsibilities at both first and second base. Now, we'll also use this anytime we see a situation in which U2 leaves with runners in scoring position. So say U2 leaves, U3's route then will be very similarly a little bit deeper into the working area. So let me go ahead and draw here our situation. Let's say here in this case that U2 decides to leave to go cover a trouble ball to the outfield. U3's route, again, very similarly, should be a little bit deeper towards the mound, because as we see in this situation with U2 out with runners in scoring position, U3 will be responsible then for everything at second and third base, okay, at second and third base here. So we want to put this umpire a little bit deeper, go chest the ball, and then allow us then to go ahead and close in on the play as the play goes ahead and develops. Hopefully we kind of see that theme here. And again, in the full rotation, you can be a little bit closer to the base because your responsibility is singular, whereas in the fill rotation, when you are filling the vacancy, you have two bases or multiple bases, and as a result then you want to be a little bit deeper in your positioning inside the working area. When U3 leaves, U2 will pivot back in. That is the fill of the vacancy here. And again, just as we talked about before, if two umpires break on the same fly ball, we will defer to U2. Whether U2 is correct or not in pursuing that fly ball, that trouble ball to the outfield, remember the wing umpires then will go ahead and break off pursuit and come on into the working area. Okay, but that generally here is the fill rotation. Again, fill rotation used with runners in scoring position and anytime U1 decides to go ahead and leave. Now, let's take a look at some of these clips here that'll give us a look at this fill rotation. The first one is a situation with U1 out. Okay, remember, anytime that U1 decides to leave, and this is a good chase by U1, because the ball is on the line, the right fielder is moving hard towards the line as well. A very good nonverbal here that we'll hit later in our series is a stop hand. This here that we see, this outstretched stop hand, communicates to U2 that U1 is on the ball. So this is a really good nonverbal that we can use, is that stop hand that basically says, hey, I got it. You can go ahead and rotate. And again, this is then the fill rotation. So anytime U1 leaves, as we see done in this play, U2 then will pivot in. And this is exactly where we see U2. Now, as I mentioned here in the diagram, we kind of want to be a little bit closer to the mound. But I think the other thing that we have to be aware of, and I do believe this umpire does a good job of it, is oftentimes here, especially with runners in scoring position, we could have a cutoff or play to the plate. So again, be very alert as you come into the working area. Again, chest to ball here, and then make sure that we know where our cutoffs are going to be. That way, we're not necessarily in the way of that cutoff's throw back to the plate. And very similarly, we're also not in the way of that cutoff. And let's say they try and go to the batter runner at second base, we're not necessarily in the way of that throw either. So again, the deeper we are towards the mound, that's going to provide that freedom of movement, one of the general philosophies here too. So get a little bit deeper, chest to ball, and again, you don't want to be in the way of the cutoff to the plate, nor do we want the cutoff to second base throw for us to be in that throwing lane as well. So I think this umpire does a pretty good job here of getting into the working area. Could be a little bit deeper towards the mound, but nonetheless here, we don't want to be in the way. We want to make sure we provide freedom of movement. Again, a really good look here at the behind the plate camera for us. U1's out, good stop hand to communicate that I'm on the ball. And then U2 here is responsible for filling the vacancy created by U1. That's going to require U2 then to pivot into the working area. Again, just be alert to cutoffs and plays back into the base. Let's take a look here at U3 in this rotation. So in this case, U2 is going to go out, and now U3 has to pivot into the working area. So again, we see this fly ball out to left center. We have runners in scoring position. Bases are actually loaded here. U3 is going to have to pivot inside into the working area. You kind of see his head right here at the bottom of the screen. And again, as I mentioned, we want to be alert to the throwing lanes of these fielders as well. So the deeper we can get to the mound, chest to ball, the better we're going to be, because we can afford freedom of movement. Now, this umpire shouldn't try and duck out of the way. Rather, we should just pivot and take snapshots with our chest with the baseball or the softball. His eyes aren't necessarily on the ball here, but we just want to pivot and open up with the ball. Remember, U3 here in this case is responsible for everything at second and third base. That's the fill rotation with U2 out covering catch, no catch. So again, we want to be chest to ball here. If this throw, for example, gets cut off and gets sent to third or gets sent to second base, we want to be chest to ball in an athletic position to be able to get to those different spots. So again, chest to ball, a huge fundamental for us to kind of consider here. Again, same clip here with U2 out. U3 is going to pivot in here in the fill rotation with runners in scoring position. In this case, we have runners at first and second. So U2's out on this fly ball. He's going to pivot into the working area, responsible for both second and third base. Go chest to ball, let the ball take you to the play. Be careful not to overcompensate to one base or the other, and also be careful to afford freedom of movement of fielders. Last one for us to look at is U2 coming into rotation. So in this case, U3 is going to give chase with runners in scoring position. In this case, it's first and third. So U3 goes out, sort of. And in this case here, then, U2 is going to pivot inside into the working area. He should be chest to ball because, again, remember, if this throw is cut off and sent back to second base, he's going to have responsibilities for second base. If there's a rundown, for example, at third base here or anything back onto R3, he would have that responsibility as well, would U2. Now, this play goes to the plate. Good job by our plate umpire. Great wedge position here. Good use of eyes. Sees the ball pop out. But nonetheless here, a really good job by our umpires to rotate accordingly. Now, one thing at least to go ahead and highlight in this play and give us one more idea here, and we'll go over some of these responsibilities more specifically later on in the series. But here with U3 out, or anytime U3 has had to vacate third base or his area with a runner at third base, in this case we have a tag-up attempt, we always will see the tag-up, the coverage of the tag-up attempt advance to the umpire at the base ahead of this runner. So, for example, U3 here is out on this fly ball. He cannot cover, in this case, U3 cannot cover the tag up of R3 because he has the trouble ball. So R3's tag goes to the umpire at the base positioned ahead. So this tag up would belong to the plate umpire. Likewise, let's say U2 went out on a fly ball and U3 had to pivot in. Because U3 had to vacate and pivot in, we're still going to pass that tag up attempt by R3 onto the plate umpire. So anytime that you are required to move, either to track and chase a fly ball, as U3's done here, or rotate to the next base, you're going to give that tag up. That tag up attempt is going to advance to the umpire ahead of that play. And we'll go over that and those responsibilities a little bit more specifically as we get deeper and deeper into the 4-umpire system here. But nonetheless here, for our purposes in the fill rotation, U3's out with runners in scoring position. U2 pivots in as we see here. Chest the ball, that allows the plate umpire to stay at home. Wedge this one up and go from there. Okay. Couple last kind of comments, or at least big picture ideas here, big picture takeaways here before we go ahead and call it a day. First of all, I think in order to make sure that we can go ahead and execute these rotations, there's a couple guiding principles to keep in mind. Number one, always think ahead pre-pitch. Know the situation and know whether or not you're in a full or a fill rotation, and think about that in that regard. Now, we'll go over hand signals that I'll suggest to use and things like that a little bit more specifically as we go in throughout the progression of the entire presentation on the 4-umpire system throughout the month. But number one, we've always got to be thinking ahead pre-pitch. Hey, what's required of me if this person leaves, so on and so forth. So think ahead here, full versus fill. Second thing here, pause, read, react, be huge fundamentals here, and then even adjusting our position. We'll talk a little bit more about adjusting our position later on in the month as well. But pause to read the fielders and your partners. Remember, reading the fielder and the partner is more important than reading the ball here with the ball in the air, the batted ball off the air. In the air. Remember, if 2 umpires break on the same fly ball, we're deferring to U2. That means U2's our quarterback, and whether or not U2 is correct, the wing umpire, U1 or U3, will break off his or her pursuit and either pivot or just go ahead and rotate accordingly. And lastly, we want to make sure that we react aggressively. Okay, we react by rotating aggressively with the intention of always arriving before the runner and remaining chest to ball. Now, this last concept of adjusting as the play evolves is something that we've hinted at. I'm going to leave us with this one here as we get ready to take some questions and kind of move on here in just a second. But adjusting as the play evolves is going to be a theme that we'll continue to address and discuss later on in our series here this season. And again, we want to make sure that we can try and get into the best position possible. We know that the wedge gives us generally the best look possible here for us, but oftentimes getting to the wedge is limited by our responsibilities. Remember, if we have multiple responsibilities, we're going to have to go to the working area. But if our responsibilities are singular, we can go ahead and use the wedge. And we'll talk about how to adjust those positions and things of that nature as we continue then to look at more and more situations and understand more and more concepts here with regards here to the 4-umpire system. But nonetheless, here today, our big picture focus, our big picture items that we wanted to make sure that we went ahead and discussed were number one, that we understood the general philosophies here of the 4-umpire system, those 5 basic principles. And then secondly, that we made sure that we touch base with both of the rotations and understand, number one, when we're supposed to use them, and secondly, how we're supposed to arrive at the bases that we're required to go ahead and get to. DJ and Seth, anything that I may have missed in my emphasis or anything like that here today?
Go ahead if you got something, DJ.
Just reiterating the importance of, this is new stuff to us, some of us, but want to just make sure that we don't overanalyze or overcomplicate anything. We're going to dive in over the next few weeks and continue to get really specific. I think this was a good layout structure. Seth made a point earlier today to us. There's 3 rotations really. It's either full, fill, or you don't. And beyond that, we can dive into the intricacies. But no need to overanalyze or overcomplicate. It's pretty self-explanatory when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it. Seth?
Yep. Just to echo what DJ just said. There's only 3 possibilities on any given batted ball throughout the whole game. Either everybody's rotating, one person's rotating, or nobody's rotating. And it's that simple. So as long as you can recognize those situations, you're going to be able to nail a system. It's not hard.
The last thing I got here before we go ahead and give some announcements and close things up here, and we'll hold on like we normally do to go ahead and chat a little bit, is to encourage everyone to run the system here by the book. Because what's important here for us to realize is that as many of us go ahead and chase a lot of the different types of goals and aspirations that we have in this avocation, when we go to state tournaments and work with people that we're not familiar with, when we go to regional tournaments and are being evaluated, and then the World Series is as well, these systems is essentially what gives us a common ground. around. So if we're not using these things as written in the manuals and as expressed in the manuals, we're doing ourselves and ultimately our partners a disservice here. So try not to invent too much stuff that are basically works around, if you will, here, or inventing mechanics here of the 4-umpire system. Try and go straight to the book, because again, that's going to help you and then your partners then succeed, whether it be in that individual tournament or then here in the future when you are being evaluated a state, sectional, regional, or even potentially a World Series assignment. So just something to think about here of making sure that you stick with the system and try and go to it, not only because it's going to help your crew be successful, but it also help you obviously be successful as well. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up, and then I'm going to hang on here with questions and things like that for anything that we may not have covered and Nate needs clarified. We'll be back at it same time, same place next week for part 2 of the 4-umpire system. We'll dive a little bit more into the basic responsibilities. So there's a little bit more in areas of responsibility, fair foul coverage, tag up responsibilities, and some of those ideas here are behind adjusting with the play that we'll definitely go ahead and take a look at then next week. So again, today was big picture ideas on the full and fill rotation. Remember, keep it simple, as Seth and DJ said. Either you don't rotate, the situation says you do not have to rotate, you use the full rotation where everyone rotates, or use the fill rotation where only one umpire rotates, and that'll go ahead and get you to where you need to be. Keep reminding everybody to stay chest to ball and keep using your eyes properly. That's a big point of emphasis, not only in the 2-umpire system, the 1-umpire system, but also here in the 4-umpire system. Appreciate everybody being here. Again, same time, same place next week for part 2 of the 4-umpire system. Look forward to seeing everybody then. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.